Chris and anger. To call Chris an angry person would be an understatement. Chris has anger management issues that usually surface when he is under stress. Trolls refer to Chris's fits of rage as tired rage, an expression normally used to describe the seemingly superhuman strength a normally mid-tempered slow-in-the-mind displays when he or she is pushed too far and goes on an anger-fueled rampage. Although in Chris's case, superhuman in strength can easily be replaced with impotent and bawling. Causes of Chris's anger. Chris's issues with anger mainly stem from being tormented in his early childhood by his abusive babysitter, whom he was frequently left under care with while Barb would go out clubbing and taking shots. She allegedly traumatized Chris by locking him up alone in a room full of toys when he was only a year old. Ironically, Chris did the same to himself up until the date of his arrest at almost age 40. Another person who may be behind Chris's anger issues could be his late father, Bob. Being Bob's son, Chris would likely have been afraid to retaliate to the things Bob did that annoyed him, such as very rarely washing his hands, making Chris remove videos from the damn internet, and occasionally cutting down Chris's access to the web. Chris then takes out his anger on innocent well-meaning trolls, such as Clyde Cash. Another cause of Chris's anger is the fact that up until age 30, Chris was a virgin. Being a virgin seemed to make Chris feel like he was entitled to be allowed frequent moments of rage, and seeing as he only masturbated twice a week due to his bent duck, he may have had large amounts of testosterone stored up in his body. He just needed to get out. Sexual frustration can even make the best of us a bit cranky, though never to this extreme. After supposedly losing his virginity to Maya Hamm, Chris did not hesitate in ending his 2-year hiatus from Twitter just to wish death upon Michael Snyder. Furthermore, Chris is autistic and therefore lacks an understanding of the social restraints of anger. When he gets angry, he sees no reason why he shouldn't go positively nuts. This and the amount of bottled up stress that autism produces have shown that autistic children can be very short-tempered. Chris, however, is not an autistic child. He is an autistic adult. And while most other autistics learn to cope with stress in other ways other than tantruming by the time they're in their 30s, Chris hasn't. Somewhat ironically, Chris's autism seems to cause him a large amount of anger, since the rest of the world will lack knowledge of the brilliance of solitude, which is apparently directly brought about by Chris's autism. But the one thing that causes Chris's anger more than anything is the lack of control he has over everything. His own ego refuses to allow Chris to think of anything but himself, and when things spiral out of control, he gets frustrated. When Bob demanded that Chris take down the videos of their house, Chris could only flail and tell him he didn't know what to do, only to tell his fans to take down the video for him. When someone pretends to be him and be more popular than him, he rages because he feels that the popularity is his, not the faker's. When people poke fun at him or constantly question one's gender, he goes into a hissy fit. Chris's anger issues date back to even before the formal beginning of his love quest. In 2000, he was prescribed the antidepressant Paxil to help manage his frustration and anger, and he continued to take the drug for several years. Whatever effect this medication had, it clearly wasn't enough. Examples of Chris's anger. The way Chris expresses his anger can be considered confusing, to say the least. In one of his early fits of rage, he began to shout "Curse ye ha me ha" at several jerk-ops who were trying to kick him out of a local Walmart. In general, Chris expresses anger like an internet tough guy would do, taking out his anger on a video camera, knowing that it obviously can't and won't fight back. This can be seen in one of the videos on Clyde Cash, where he seems to be hulking up. He also used to beat up representations of people he disliked in Soul Calibur. On the other hand, even as he is seemingly scared of expressing his anger in real life, he seems to have outbursts when sufficiently pushed as well. Chris was at one point forced to take an anger management class sometime after his final confrontation with Mary Lee Walsh. What happened during this epic struggle is only known in Chris's own words. Then that B-dog ripped up my notes and all, dragged me to her quarters, and talked down to me very rudely and hoarsely. I reacted with my own attack that she had been asking for the whole time. I was kicked out of CWCki for a year, and I had to take an anger management course and see a psychiatrist for a while. I was let back in. A great example of Chris's anger can be seen in one of his most infamous videos, his YouTube finale. In this video, Chris repeatedly threatens poor Clyde, claiming he will indeed strangle him someday, even going as far as telling Clyde he would commit this heinous and reprehensible act in a police station, showing Chris has no control over his angry feelings. The fact Clyde was only trolling Chris in an attempt to lash out at him for his role in his fictional death of his late brother Ryan Cash shows even further how much Chris still may require a few anger management classes. His cameras would also benefit from some relief, as he often punches them to dramatically end his more rage-infused videos. On several occasions, Chris has also shouted and screamed at his videos, and concluded his argument with some sort of heinous threat, and promptly followed this up with his trademark conclusion of saying peace, showing the peace sign, or with have a nice day, or something similar. Chris is apparently completely oblivious to how jarring it is to go from yelling, get everything off the internet, now, 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 to curse the trolls, peace to everyone else, immediately after. I'll be continuing my comics at the moment, but any further incident, and not only will I stop the comic, but I'll also go to the police, alright? Back the fuck off. Have a good day. Occasionally, when enraged, his tendency to type important words in all caps becomes more prominent. Compare these two emails from the Miyamoto saga. The first sounds fairly calm, though he does let loose on one all-caps phrase. The second sounds angrier and possibly a bit desperate. Also, please inform Mr. Miyamoto, I have just awoken inspired, Sonichu-wise. I figured out the opening title movie for Sonichu's Adventures, the prequel comic for the possible Pokemon Lightning version, and the monetary type collectibles in Sonichu's Adventures. Not rings, but C quarters, the main money, and W quarters equals 10 C quarters. Chris explaining shit nobody cares about. Listen, people of Nintendo, during my lifetime, my family and I have invested thousands of American dollars and cents into Nintendo video games and systems, from NES and Game Boy to GameCube to Wii to DS to GBA. I have also attached my list of video games I have in my collection, 90% of which were all bought brand new while available in the stores during its mint availability. Surely you can spot back just under $800 for our trip to Seattle in advance. Chris, on his knees, begging for money so he can fly to Redmond, citing his extensive collection of Nintendo games as the reason why Miyamoto should fork over $700. Other examples of Chris's anger show him taking out his tired rage on his clown doll. In the Take That Page Down video, a picture of Clyde Cash was taped to a doll, and Chris beat it like a spoiled 3-year-old who smashes a plate of broccoli because he didn't get his way. He also attempted to rip its head off at one point, only to have it slide through his greasy palms. Chris would attempt to bite the doll's head off again in the Sign Destruction video, but fans of the doll would be relieved to know that Chris is far too weak to break anything of value. He is only merely able to tear off the clown's hat. In the video, Chris loses it. Chris proved to us that he's able to shred in half a small cardboard box, but is unable to go through light pressed wood. The video also shows his poor acting skills, only equal his overall stamina, since he's out of breath before the end of the first minute of the video. A rare example of where Chris's anger manifests in physical violence against others would be in the infamous Blahms incident, where he maced a GameStop employee during his war on Sonic's new arm colour. Rah! Most of the monologue in the Chris Loses It video. Another example has shown that Chris can and will blow up at people, even on his telephone. When Chris mistakenly believed that Jason Kendrick Howell had hacked his website, he left an angry voicemail. In the father call, Chris quickly became rude at Casey's father, Matthew, especially when the man came down on Chris for his health and his attitude. Even worse, when Chris talked to Casey and Liquid, he came up in arms over Liquid's continued referral of Ian Anderson, and was completely oblivious over the fact that Casey was getting upset over the entire thing. Even worse, Chris attempted to hang up on both Matthew and Casey, only succeeding with Casey because he got his mum and dad in on the conversation. Both instances show that Chris loses his stammering and actually starts speaking normally when enraged. Around the time when Chris opened the mailbag to his adoring fans, another factor that causes Chris some notable grief was discovered to be mentioned in any similarity between high-functioning autism and Asperger's syndrome. Chris has shown himself to be quite adamant that HFA and Asperger's are highly unrelated, despite documentation by researchers suggesting quite the opposite. The anger related to this is of a far lesser magnitude in comparison to, for example, the Liquid Chris saga. It is still clear he's easily irritated by the mere mention of the matter. If anything, the Asperger's people are, and have been normal. They think they can one-up or even match autism with the lack of social capability and their clumsiness and such. Those characteristics can be faked by them, who are most normal compared to us true autistic people. Chris, in his Wikipedia article on Asperger's syndrome. It's surprising at first how irritated Chris is by the matter. However, the Wikipedia article makes it clear that Chris is angry at Asperger's sufferers for stealing the limelight from autistic folks, such as himself. He seems to believe that those diagnosed with the condition are faking it to get attention that he feels he deserves as an autistic person. Decline of the tired raging. In recent years, Chris's behaviour has generally started to get much less aggressive. Possible reasons for this includes medication, effects of therapy, becoming more relaxed in his older age, or increasing, but not perfect, resistance to trolls and weans, brought on by years of wear. Some of Chris's medication is credited for anxiety relief by him, including Paxil, paroxetine, a non-specific blood pressure prescription, and Valium. He attended therapy after the pepper spray incident and apparently learned some new methods of coping. An example of this can be seen in the revised Sonichu issue 10, which includes a text that appears to be inspired by a therapy session. For examples of trolling that didn't elicit rage, Chris did not go into a fit when Jeff Francine Troll tried to steal his identity, making videos on it, but refraining from screaming like he did during the Liquid saga. Michael Hertz attempts to troll him were almost always met by Chris simply blocking his multiple accounts, until Chris gave up and just disabled notifications with this kid, and let him go on. Similarly, in response to the PewDiePie video dedicated entirely to Chris, instead of complaining about him making that video, which is completely devoted to criticizing him, Chris instead simply requested for him to direct message him. On the other hand, examples of when Chris recently raged include threatening Lulu's executives with violence, P. Mert's presidency, becoming angry at Weens when they had hassled no-whacking about him, getting angry at Weens harassing Doopy to get into her pants, having a meltdown when he thought trolls ruined his relationship with Jessica Quinn, and raging at Weens who got him blocked by several people in the My Little Pony fandom which he follows. This shows that some things can still trigger Chris more than others.